As always, we will begin with 3 deep breaths. So let's take a deep breath in through the nose. Softly let this out of the mouth. Deep breath in again. Softly out of the mouth. And last one all the way in. And let it out with a nice sigh. So today's topic is going to be one that I have been talking about on various social media platforms for the last 5 years. My truthful and honest thoughts about being off of my SSRIs now for 5 whole years. I do have some questions that I brought with me today that have been asked to me throughout this year by various people that I think are really beautiful questions. And so the layout of how I'm really going to speak into this episode, and these episodes usually tend to be a bit longer. I tend to have a lot to say on this topic, so thank you for being here and following my train of thought. But I really want to hit on, in the beginning, if you have listened to me discuss this over the last few years, you're going to listen to me discuss it again. I'm going to give a brief recap of getting on medication, my thoughts about going on medication and certain things of those. And then I really want to give you, I have these questions with me because usually I just let myself kind of brain dump while we're having this conversation. And although I think that's beautiful, I do think I've been asked some really incredible questions this year by people that can also shift the way that we view being medicated and not being medicated. So no matter what platform you're listening on, I just want to first and foremost say thank you so much. I started the Wolf Mother podcast in 2023. And it's now the end of 2025. And I have loved this podcast and this style of sharing on social media in a different way, obviously, than Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, those like short form versions. So I just really want to thank each and every one of you for being here. And I hope that this episode, whether you are just interested in my journey and my life, if you have someone that you love in your life that has considered medication or is medicated, or if this is about you and you're looking for your own answers for your own life, I hope that this episode just provides you with a bit more perspective and space than you had prior to this episode. And maybe it doesn't do jack shit for you. Maybe it doesn't do anything. Maybe you show up, you grab your cup of tea, you listen to me rant, and you go, okay, thanks, Dan, and you move on with your life. It doesn't always have to be that serious, but if it is that serious for you, I do hope that it creates a little bit more space for some more perspective. So, it is now December of 2025 when I'm recording this. In January of 2016, in December of 2015 was when I made the decision. My therapist and I came to the conclusion that I was doing all the spiritual things, right? I had been in therapy for many years. I did sound healings. I got energy healing done. I went and I sat in ceremony. I did the movement-based classes and all that stuff. And my therapist and I came to the dead end where she really looked at me and said, you know, this is not a failure. This is just, we're at that fork in the road where if you want to really start feeling better, I think it's in your best interest to go on medication. So January of 2016 is when I took my first SSRI. It took me 4 tries to get the right medication and dosage, by the way. So even though in January I started taking a medication, January of 2016, I started taking a medication, it probably wasn't until, I want to say April of 2016 that I was actually, April or May, where I was like, okay, this medication works for me. It's doing the right things for me. I'm not having insane side effects, because the first 3 that I had wild side effects. Like the things that you're not supposed to get, it's like a very small % chance I was experiencing those. So it did take me 4 tries. And then I was on medication. I was on Paxil until November of 2020. And I spent the entire year in 2020 slowly decreasing. And what's funny is when COVID hit, there was a certain point where I met with the psychiatrist, and she was so funny. She's like, do you want to keep going lower? And I was like, the whole world kind of shut down and I'm a little confused right now. So maybe I should coast at this dosage for a little bit. And so I did. So I think it took me longer to come off of my medication because COVID happened and everything was so uncertain at that time, but I don't regret it. And I think it was beautiful spending an entire year very, very slowly. Like I went in increments of 5 at a certain point, like going from 50 to 45, 45 to 40. Like I really, really took it slow. And I think there's something so beautiful about that. I'm not here to prescribe you anything. And I'm not here to tell you what you should do. But it is my opinion, and I'm going to state my opinion. Do not go on medication if you aren't seeing a therapist as well. Psychiatrists prescribe you the medication, but they're not sitting down with you weekly, bi-weekly. There was a point in time when it came to therapy where I was in therapy twice a week. They're not sitting down with you for these long conversations. And truth be told, when it came to me getting off my medication, my therapist was the one that advocated for me getting off the medication. And what I mean by that is literally what she did is she called the psychiatrist's office because I had been asking. I was like, I would really like to have the discussion. You go to the psychiatrist's office, you talk to them for like 10, 15 minutes, and then that's usually it. Sometimes you have a longer conversation with them if they don't have a million people outside in their waiting room. But where I went, Krasmir Psychiatrics on Staten Island, where I went, there was usually a lot of people in that waiting room. They serviced many different people with many different backgrounds that were going through different things. So it was very busy in there all the time. So it was rare I got to have long conversations with my psychiatrist. And I also felt like, this is my own personal experience, the psychiatrist didn't really care other than the metrics questions that they kind of had, which was like, do you feel stable? Are you good? Do you feel better from last time? Okay, you feel better from last time. What does that mean? On a scale of 1 to 10, how much better are you feeling? And when you say better, what also does that even mean? Like questions like that. Whereas my therapist was having longer conversations with me on a more regular basis. So when I get clients that come to me and they say they want to work with me one-on-one, one of the first questions I always ask is, are you in therapy? And if you're not in therapy, are you willing to go to therapy? Because what I do as a healing practitioner, somebody that works in the healing arts and energy healing and medicine healing and all of these things, what I have really grown to know is that the most beautiful thing is that I created a pizza pie for myself back then. It was not one thing that allowed me to move through depression, but it was the medication paired along with a really incredible fucking therapist, paired along with the sound healings, going to yoga on an everyday basis. There was a time where I used to go to yoga therapy. I paid a lot of money to go to yoga therapy, and it was one-on-one sessions. Sometimes I did small groups, but it was so unbelievably worth it. I did sit in ceremonies that I was safe to sit in. Obviously, if you're on SSRIs, you're not sitting in ayahuasca ceremonies. Hello. And if you are sitting in ayahuasca ceremonies, or you know somebody that's serving ayahuasca and says, you could just not take your SSRI that morning, they don't understand science at all. But that's a completely different conversation that we can have another time. So anyway, I had that. At the time that I went on medication, I had really good family members backing me. I had incredible friends that backed me. Like, besides the spiritual community that I, was a part of, whatever kirtans I went to and whatever other group gatherings I did, and, the pagan groups that I was a part of, I had incredible friends that really wanted the best for me. Even if you only have 1 or 2 really incredible friends that want the best for you, it's so important to lean on those people and express this is why I'm going on this medication, and this is my desired outcome. That's exactly what I did, right? I told my closest people to me, I was like, I think I am addicted to drugs and alcohol, and I think I am severely depressed. And the funny thing is, at that time, I had two completely separate worlds happening. I had one side of that world that looked at me and was like, you think you're addicted to alcohol and drugs? Hello, yes, we see this every day. We know you are. And they were like, we want the best for you, so we want to see you come out on the other side. And then I had a different lane of people that were like, no, like we drink and smoke and do coke and hang out all the time. Like we're all the same. Like you're not depressed. You're just like everyone else. Obviously those people are no longer in my life. And those people, I think deep within their souls, are very good people. And I don't think they had the emotional awareness, understanding, or also mental clarity that I was having at that time, where I was like, no, I don't think we're supposed to drink away the depression every night like we do. So what I ask people if they are open to going to therapy as well, if they really need it, right? There are some clients that I work with that, like, you know, they've done certain, the thing is there's different types of therapy, but they've done the talk therapy and they're like, I need something more, which is really where I come in with the energy healing and the somatic experiencing and stuff like that, right? But what I needed as somebody who was diagnosed with depression, who was having manic episodes and had a severe anxiety that I still grapple with today, that I'm sure we'll talk about more, I needed that whole pizza pie. That was everything that I needed. I needed connection to nature, and I needed people that wanted me to be in nature with them, people that wanted to say, let's go outside for a walk. This obviously, you've been inside too long. Like, it sounds silly, but little things like that people knew that I was now medicated, that were like, okay, I'm glad you're medicated. I'm glad you went to a sound healing last night, but you still seem off. Let's go to the park for a little bit. Creating a pizza pie, and I always say that it's a pizza pie, creating that pizza pie, there was no one thing that was going to get me through that really intense experience of depression. It had to be multiple things coming together. So that was my experience. When I decided that I was ready to come off of antidepressants, it was because I knew the antidepressants, they did their fucking job. Excuse me. They were a great crutch. They were really incredible. Do not get me wrong. They did what they were supposed to do. But with that being said, so funny to say that. They really, the medication worked. I took the drugs and the drugs are working. Like, they really did work. But there came a point where I was like, I've been doing so much more inner work with myself. And when I went on the medication that first year, I said, April, that's my therapist's name. I was like, April, I'm only going to be medicated for 1 year and that's it. And she was like, okay, girly pop. And then I was medicated for 5 whole years. I don't regret that, but there was a point during that experience where I was angry with myself, right? it was like halfway through my medication journey, and I was angry that I was still on medication, and I just felt really shameful about myself, because in the spiritual community, in the health and wellness community, medication is very demonized. So let me say, I don't demonize medication at all. Also, I let go of clients if I think they need therapists and medication. And you might be listening to this and saying, Dan, I was one of those people that you let go. And I don't do it because I don't love you. I just recognize I'm not the medicine that you need right now. You need medication and a clinical setting where they can have conversations with you. And then when you guys come back to me, I love it. It's beautiful, right? I can work alongside that if you can handle doing all that at once. But yes, I will let go of clients if I recognize I am not what you need. This is not the safety that you need right now. So I also want to make sure that I'm clear with that. Let's take a deep breath in. Deep breath out. So during taking medication, felt extreme waves of shame that came in, right? They were my safety blanket, the medication, the Paxil. It really was my everything at some point, or so I thought. When I was in the thick of it, I was like, this is everything that I need. Like, I could never go anywhere without my medication. Obviously, I couldn't travel without it. It was something I had to take every single day, obviously, hello, to feel okay. And then now that I've had so much space from being on medication, I wish I could hug myself when I felt those moments of shame, because those moments of shame only came from other people and the story that they placed on me. What do I mean by that? My parents always encouraged my spirituality. From a young age, they were like, she talks to dead people, cool, we don't care. Oh, she astral projects, she lucid dreams, cool, don't care. She does her own thing, she loves yoga, fine, great. So my parents never discouraged that. They also didn't discourage me being medicated either. And I'm so grateful that neither of them did that. They wanted what was best for me, and my parents felt like at the age of 19, with the upbringing that I had, it didn't make sense to them for me to be so depressed. Obviously, this was them having to sit down even with my therapists and their own therapists to learn about how clinical depression works, right? It wasn't something they did, or blah, 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 all those kind of stories that usually parents come up with. Well, we gave you a good childhood. It's like, that I was not experiencing that stuff. I was genuinely experiencing, I think in some ways, to be woo-woo for a second, I was experiencing separateness from spirit, right? I was doing a bunch of cocaine, smoking a fuck ton of weed, drinking a ton of alcohol every single day. So I was definitely disconnected from spirit, but I was also just disconnected and struggling with being alive. I know where my issues stem from, especially being 5 years off medication now. I've had so much more time to sit with myself. Also, this is my third holiday season in Peru. So living in the Andes Mountains of Peru, there's a lot more time for me to have thought over these past few years. It's a little bit more crazy when I'm back in New York and a little bit more calm when I'm here. And so there is this piece for me where I do recognize that it shocks me to be alive. I have struggled with existential dread my whole life. I think being a young child and being able to see dead people, speak to dead people easily, be comfortable to do that type of stuff. By the time I was in middle school, that's when I was astral projecting and lucid dreaming. It has always felt uncomfortable. Not every moment of every day, but I have experienced so much discomfort being alive because as a young kid, I was also confused by it. I was confused. What does it mean to be alive when I can also talk to dead people so much? Now, I didn't start going to therapy or experiencing intense anxiety, mania, panic attacks until my grandfather passed away. I was part of my grandfather's death team, which is such an honor to watch people die. I've been a part of multiple death teams. I'm very grateful for the experience. If you can handle it, I think everyone should witness something like that at least once in their lifetime, because it really puts into perspective how precious being alive is. And at the same time, I was like 14, 15 when I watched my grandfather die. And I say watched because he was on hospice for about, I want to say, a month, maybe 4 weeks. And I was there daily. And I don't regret any of that. I think my parents were correct. I couldn't imagine who I would be if I didn't have that experience, is what I'm trying to say. But with that came panic attacks. At this point, by 14, 15, I was drinking, I was smoking weed, I was smoking salvia, I was doing mushrooms. So I was already immersed in this stuff. So there I was watching my grandfather die, and then I would take mushrooms and go sit in the woods on Staten Island and think about that. So existential dread has always been a big part of my life. And that is a lot of where I see mental issues of mine have stemmed from. And I'm sharing that because it's been something that I've really been thinking about this year. And now I kind of want to answer some of these questions that I have, because I think they'll be a good grounding pieces for us to move through. Again, thank you so much for listening, whatever platform you listen on. I wouldn't be who I am today if I wasn't medicated for those 5 years. Paxil gave me the life that I have today. I did my yoga teacher training, my breathwork training, my cacao training. Like, most of my like formative trainings for the business that I have today all happened while I was medicated, and they all happened so serendipitously and so organically and beautifully. So I just want to say thank you so much, because I would be talking to myself, which I do talk to myself often, but I would be talking to myself if it wasn't for you guys being here with me right now, having this conversation. So thank you. Okay, so a question that no one gave me, but I feel is a good one for us to start. And then I'm just going to start going through these. I'm so excited. How my spiritual path has changed now that I am 5 years off of medication. I am so much more grounded than I was 5 years ago. You also have to take into, okay, please take this. It's not just me off of antidepressants. You have to take a ton of things into consideration. It's not just 5 years off of antidepressants. It's 5 years since I worked at that ayahuasca church that was extremely ungrounding. It's 5 years that I have now been traveling to quote unquote spiritual hubs around the globe. Not a ton of them, mainly Peru, Mexico, and places in the US. Excuse me. And so I've had so much time to really step back and go, wow, what the fuck is going on within spirituality? What is happening? When I was on medication, I think it was also my therapist's intention and everybody else's intention to really keep me happy and really keep me positive and moving forward, which obviously makes sense because I was dealing with addiction and manic depressive episodes. So everyone wanted me to really be happy. So I think there was a lot of spiritual bypassing that was also happening in my life 5 years ago, that now 5 years later, I'm like, I feel like there's more spiritual resourcing happening than spiritual bypassing. And I guess let's briefly talk the difference between the two. When it comes to spiritual bypassing, we sit there and it's just like everything's fine. Everything happens for a reason. I'm so glad that this happened. Like those types of things, like just, oh, the anger that I'm experiencing, let me not experience it because happiness is the emotion that will get me to move forward. Whereas spiritual resourcing is actually using the spiritual practices that you have. If you do breath work and you don't come out happy on the other side, that doesn't mean the breath work didn't work. It just means there's another emotion for you to look at, and you might need to use another spiritual tool or practice to move past it, right? So let's say I'm feeling angry. I do 30 minutes of breath work and I come out angrier after those 30 minutes. I'm going to question myself, why am I angrier? What was the original intention that I had, and what is my intention now? Has my anger only intensified with the breathing of it? Can I feel the anger in my body? Okay, maybe now I do feel the anger in my body. Let me punch a pillow about it, throw some ice about it. Let me jump up and down I have a very large chest, for those of you that don't know. So there is some somatic experiences that I'm like, I can't do that with big tits. It just doesn't work. But anyway, however long I can jump up and down for, let me jump up and down, flail my arms, maybe do some like Tai Chi or Qigong. Like those exercises are really impactful when you're feeling the emotion in your body. So spiritual resourcing is something that I feel is more a part of my life now than spiritual bypassing was, where it was just like, let me keep using the affirmations and say it over and over again. I am happy. I am safe. Everything's okay. When obviously at that time, I didn't always necessarily feel that way. And even now, I don't necessarily always feel that way. But instead of using the affirmations for it and just saying, I am totally okay right now, everything's totally and completely fine, I get honest with myself and I say, I'm flipping the fuck out and I wish I could rip my skin off layer by layer. Okay, why do I feel that way? What is something that would make me feel good right now? So leave a comment on whatever platform you're listening to if you'd like to go deeper into spiritual bypassing versus spiritual resourcing, because I feel like that could be a really beautiful topic. Maybe we'll do a class on that in the Wolf Mother Circle tier on Patreon next month on Zoom. Maybe we'll do that. Who knows? Okay, what did I used to believe about healing versus what I believe now? Right? So my body and mind and spirit has just continuously evolved. I really like the second question, so maybe I can answer both of these together. How has my baseline emotional state changed? Like, what does it feel like right now? What I used to think about healing and what I believe now is that I think part of it is similar, because I knew back then I needed the pizza pie, and I still know now. There's no one singular thing that's going to help me move forward. Even when I wanted to get off of antidepressants and I told, the spirit of ayahuasca my intention of like, I want to burn away everything in my life. I want to kill away everything in my life, burn it away, whatever I was fucking saying at that time. That's gonna block me from not being able to easily evolve into this next version of me. By the way, nothing about it was easy. You really gotta watch your fucking words when you're sitting with plant medicine and creating intentions. But I recognize now and then there's no one thing. Even when I sat down with ayahuasca and I was like, yes, this is totally gonna make sure that I don't go back to medication and I don't go back to smoking weed and drinking alcohol and fucking up my life that way. Yes, maybe she gave me the push over the edge to go, I can't fucking do this shit anymore. But also at the same time, I have to make that conscious choice every single day. The baseline for my emotional state now, I have to show up for every single day. I have to show up with nervous system practices. I am not one of those people. Let me also make this clear. I'm not one of those people who went on medication and was like, phew, thank goodness, that's behind me now. Mental illness, first off, my family would probably lie about this, but it runs through my family. They all have issues, whether they want to be diagnosed or not. And it is a part of me. It's always going to be a part of me. And I'm okay with that. And I'm not saying it in a way to claim it. I'm saying it in a way to be realistic. New things make me anxious. Sometimes old things make me anxious. Change sometimes makes me depressed. It doesn't always. But when it comes up, I'm not like, oh my God, that piece of me is behind me. No, I don't want it to come back. Like, no. Anxiety has always taught me something. Manic episodes have always taught me something, and depressive episodes have always taught me something. I can learn something from what I'm feeling right now rather than say, get this the fuck away from me. This is a piece of my past. But I have to show up for those things to happen. So I do think what I used to believe about healing and what I believe now is similar in those ways, but I also recognize I've grown. I mean, I was 19 when I went on Paxil, and I'm 29 now. My wise age of 29. And I recognize it's so much more nuanced. There's so much more fucking gray area than I thought at 19. At 19, I knew there was gray area. I knew it wasn't black and white. I knew I wasn't just going to take this pill and it was going to be a magic fix. I had to keep going to therapy every week. I had to go to yoga therapy. I had to go to other movement classes and sound healings and hang out with my friends that made me smile and go to shows and listen to music that made me feel good and alive. And like I was also moving energy within myself. But now at 29, I recognize there's so much more gray area, so much more nuance and things that I don't know. Of course, when you're young, you're like, I know what I know. I, at 29, can honestly say I know nothing about nothing. Every day I wake up and I'm like, what am I going to learn today? And I think that's a beautiful attitude to have. And I'm glad that I have that attitude at 29. My nervous system capacity has definitely shifted. And this is something I've really reflected on. So subtle mental health issues are going to arise in my life. It's just what is going to happen, right? As I was just saying. I'm not going to be naive and say it's never going to happen again, because life changes. People die. The fuck? People die and it's sad. What? I finished a book this morning and I cried for 35 minutes and it made me so sad. Dylan was like, "You need to like go on a walk. This book affected you more than it really should have." I feel deeply, and that's a beautiful thing, right? And that's something that's been interesting, is people in spiritual communities saying something to me when I'm like, "Oh yeah, I used to be on medication." And they're like, "Oh, just like being an empath is just, so difficult," right? And I'm like, I really struggle with that shit, because in one way it feels super spiritually bypassing. Not every fucking empath on this planet needs SSRIs, okay? Like, let's be so fucking for real about that. But also, too, at the same time, yes, I do agree that being an empath and allowing myself to feel deeply, and my parents never stifling me to feel deeply. I felt deeply, and they, would call me STW, which meant save the whales, right? I was, of course, the liberal hippie child in the family. And I felt things very deeply, and they didn't tell me not to. Sometimes they would make jokes about it, but they would let me feel those things deeply. And because I didn't stifle those things, sometimes I felt them deeper and deeper and deeper. And something that my therapist said to me this year, at the beginning of the year, in January of 2025, I was like, "April, why the fuck do I live in Peru? Who told me to pack my bags and move to Peru?" And I was like, but it's more than that. Like, why am I an entrepreneur? Why have I utilized social media to put myself out there? Like, why am I doing all this shit? And why am I questioning myself so hard? Now, from an astrological perspective, yes, my Saturn is in Aries. I'm entering into the Western astrology Saturn return. With that being said, April was like, "Dan, the first time you came to my office, you had so many questions. And then for months, you had even more questions." And you continued to ask. You never didn't not ask me things. And throughout all the years that I've known you, right? So for a certain point in time, I saw April very consistently, obviously, especially when I was medicated. Now at this point, I think of her as my therapeutic spiritual counsel. I don't see her as often, but I feel we've created a bond and an experience that I'm just not willing to say, "Okay, I'm totally done with that therapist." Open to other therapists, but not done with April. So anyway, April, it was beautiful to hear her say those things. Like, she was like, this is always going to be a part of you. There's never going to be a point in your life where you're not going to question things. And it's a beautiful thing about you, but it's also created so much anxiety within your beautiful little questioning mind. So I don't like when spiritual people tell me that because I'm an empath, that's why I was medicated, is all that I'm also trying to say. I think you can be an empath without being fucking medicated. And I also think that people that aren't empaths also need to be fucking medicated. So again, gray area, nuance, all that stuff. Something that I've really noticed is that the drugs worked a little too good. Took the drugs and the drugs are working, and they worked a little too good there. So although I was still going to all of these retreats and ceremonies and getting these sessions done, I needed more. I needed to feel a little bit more of the anxiety and the panic and the depression, so that when I was off medication, I would have had better coping skills for those things. Let's take a deep breath in, deep breath out. What I mean by this is that it's really hard to have been on medication for 5 years and then to not be medicated. In that first year, and I know I've talked about this, I don't know where that episode is, if it's only on Instagram, but in the first, it probably is because I didn't have the Wolf Mother podcast yet, but in that first year, I remember there were so many times where I said to Dylan, like, "I just want my medication. This is so wildly overwhelming." I didn't recognize how good the medication was working. And so, although I had these practices while I was on medication, right, and these things that I did to soothe myself, once I was off medication, it felt like an entirely different ballgame. I didn't have that baseline where the medication put me anymore. So I felt fucking crazy. I remember the first time I said, oh my God, April, I really need a session. She's like, okay, no worries. We got in a session. I go, April, something is really wrong. I can't stop thinking. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, my brain, it's just constantly talking to me, and I'm constantly having thoughts, and I'm feeling tapped into so many different things that I want to do, and people that I've spoken to, and places that I've been. And she was like, yes. I was like, what do you mean, yes? She was like, so you mean that your brain is working? And I was like, what the fuck? I was like, damn, the Paxil took away all of that. Like, it slowed down the racing thoughts that I had. It slowed down some of the anxiety thoughts that I had. It slowed it down to a point where I really felt like I was great. I felt like I had unlocked this thing within myself. And now that I've had all these years to reflect on it, I recognize, no, that was just the medication doing what the medication is supposed to do. And it was obviously keeping me stable. So now it requires so much more of me to stay stable. It requires me to wake up every day and make the conscious effort to meditate, even if the meditation is uncomfortable, to do breath work, even if the breath work is fucking annoying. It requires me to go to the gym, go on walks. It requires me to cry and lean on the people that I need to talk to. It requires me to lean on other things that I don't always want to lean on, because it's like, damn, do I really have to do breath work for the third time today? Yes, sometimes I do need to do 3 different times of breath work to get through the day. And there's no shame in that, is what I feel I've really come to terms with in this now 5th year that I'm coming to off of medication. There was a part of me that felt in the last 2 years like, no, like you should be able to just get up and do what you want. Not in the world that we have. All of us need to work very hard. I don't care if you're an entrepreneur. I don't care if you work a 9 to 5. Like, we're all working very hard to pay lots of bills that we all have. We are all living in this capitalistic society that sometimes feels like we're swimming upstream. Listen, there are some of you that are in this community. I know you are well off, baby. And I love that for you. But that is not all of us in this community. And so there's that piece. There's the piece that, I really wanted. I always had the goal in mind that by 30, I was going to be able to buy land and a house. And now at 29, I'm not going to say it's not impossible. I may meet someone who says, hey, Dan, I want to gift you this home. Okay. But realistically, looking at this next year of my life, I most likely will not be in that position. And that weighs on me, right? Like the ticking clock of people asking Dylan and I, are you guys going to get married? Are you guys going to have children? The society that we live in is also fed in tons of ways with media. If you're listening to this podcast, you interact with YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. It may not be quick form content like Instagram and TikTok, but it's still content and media nonetheless. That is extremely overwhelming for us as well. So the world that we live in requires me personally to wake up every day and make the conscious effort to soothe myself. To soothe my physical body, to soothe my mental body, my emotional body, my spiritual body. And it requires me to be honest that sometimes I can do all of those things. And still at the end of the day, I go, damn, I'm still feeling kind of anxious right now. And I don't fucking know why. I've journaled about it. I've talked to either a teacher of mine, a professional that I'm working with, or a close friend of mine. Kind of still haven't been able to figure it out. I've meditated, I've done all the things, and I still don't know. Again, more gray area, more nuance. So let's take another deep breath in and breathe out. I will say that my relationship to sensation and feeling is much higher off medication than it is on medication. The 5 years that I was medicated, I didn't know it at the time because I was still a crier and I was still emotional, but I didn't know it at the time that it really kept me. I never really experienced high highs or low lows. It was pretty around my baseline. Being off of medication now, all these years, whoo, I experience really high highs and very low lows. Let me tell you, my relationship to pleasure and grief and joy and excitement and sadness and nostalgia, like I feel all of this so much more. When I was medicated, it was kind of difficult for me to talk to dead people. It took a lot more concentration. Whereas off medication, I've had to put boundaries up with some of the dead people that I do talk to, because these motherfuckers will talk for a mile a minute and I can hear every last word that they're trying to get through to me. So that's also an interesting piece of the puzzle that I've reflected on. Okay, I want to talk about my identity post medication. Who did you think you were while on SSRIs, and who have I discovered myself to be? Such a beautiful question. I'm very grateful to be surrounded by such thoughtful people that ask me questions like this. Some of them are clients and some of them are just friends that I have that are like, I want to know. Who I thought I was on SSRIs, I was so young and in ways so naive, and I thought I really had it all figured out. But I did not think of myself as strong. I thought of myself as very weak, that I needed to be medicated. And if I wasn't medicated, I was still struggling with various addictions. I've been clean from cocaine since the beginning of 2017 and alcohol and marijuana since the end of 2021. And I'm very grateful for that. And I know some people use alcohol and marijuana as plant medicines or, spiritual medicines, and that's totally fine if you have that relationship to those spirits that way. I just was abusing them in extreme ways. And so I thought of myself as very weak, that I either needed those things or I needed the Paxil to get me forward. And I recognize now that it's not a weakness, it's just a humanness. I think there are a lot of people on this planet that aren't medicated, that probably need to be medicated, or not need to, but could be medicated and live an easier life. Life here on Earth would be much easier for them. And I just happen to be one of those people that took the plunge. I could have said no to my therapist and kept drinking and kept smoking, and if anything, I recognize now that saying yes to taking SSRIs was, in fact, a strength. And it's a beautiful strength that I chose and I had. And I am not opposed if my closest friends and family and my therapist ever turned around to me again and were like, yo, you're fucking whacked out, dude. You need to be medicated again. I am not opposed to needing to be on medication. I would do exactly what I did last time, which is go through all the holistic options that I have. And then if we come to that crossroads, then I make the decision. And I think that that's also a strength that I have, is to be radically honest with myself. There are a lot of people that say that love is the highest frequency in this world, and I disagree with that. And I think that authenticity is the highest frequency that we have in this world. You can love, 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 love all you motherfucking want, but if you're not being open and honest with yourself and the other people around you, love is not gonna fucking fix that. I know people that swear by love and light and, loving themselves and loving others, but they're still not radically honest and authentic with themselves and the people that love them. So I think authenticity is the highest frequency that we have on Earth. And so with that being said, I also think that that's a strength that I possessed both times when I was on SSRIs, and who I am now is authenticity and strength. Like, whoa. And I recognize I'm a lot similar to that younger version of myself than I thought I was. I think at one point I felt so spiritually evolved and changed and emotionally so much more intelligent. And don't get me wrong, I've definitely grown in all of those areas. And I think I've always been incredible. to gas myself up, I think I've always been somebody who was very spiritually tapped in. I've always been somebody who was very emotionally intelligent and willing to learn. That's the other piece, is when I had started the medication, I was so willing to learn because I didn't want to be medicated my whole life. And now, 5 years off medication, I also don't know everything. And I have an openness and a willing to understand more. And I desire to learn from other people and their lived experiences, as well as people that are just well versed in this area, that are some people that do research on the body and the chemistry and the brain, and other people that are spiritual practitioners that have been through this. If I meet a spiritual practitioner and I find out that they've never struggled with any sort of mental illness, like on a real level, I'm not talking your generalized anxiety and depression. I'm talking like really genuinely go through it. Again, not generalized, clinical. I'm talking diagnosis. If I find that I have a spiritual practitioner that's been through that, I love sitting there and asking them questions if they're willing to answer, because I want to learn and I desire to keep learning. And I think that that is another piece that I love about, these parts of me. Okay. And so there's also another piece. This was an interesting question. Like, again, it goes to that spirituality piece of the empath. Like, what parts of me were medicated because I lived in a society that didn't know how to care for me, which kind of ties into this last piece where I was talking about being appreciative of spiritual practitioners and counselors who have been through the same thing. If you have someone in your life who is very spiritually tapped in and also fucking crazy, listen, you might be listening to this and you're like, Dan, I don't think you're crazy. You should talk to my inner circle. You should talk to my mom and my brother and Dylan and Cameron and Gab. You should really talk to the people. You should talk to Billy. You should talk to the people. You should talk to April. Call up my therapist. You should talk to the people that were there when they were like, ooh, this is... When I was on medication, I came home from a girls' trip and I decided on that girls' trip that I was going to go a few days without medication. I think this was 2019. I was wild the year of 2019. I was out of control. In good ways and bad ways. And so I decided, you know what? Fuck it. I'm fucking good, bro. So I come home from this girls' trip. I get home and it was something as simple as I think I dropped a spoon. When I tell you, my mom and Billy immediately were like, did you take your meds today? Did you take your meds yesterday? How many days have you went without medication? Because what is happening? Who is this that we are talking to right now? So you might be listening to this and I have made a lot of progress. But I'm sharing that story to let you know there are people that exist on this planet that have really witnessed the crazy. And so thank you for letting me share that story. With that being said, the pieces of me that I think were medicated because society didn't know how to support me. I've talked about this in other podcast episodes, on other people's podcasts and on The Wolf Mother, but my parents didn't know what to do with me when they found out I could talk to dead people at a young age. They didn't encourage, but they also didn't discourage. They were just really neutral about it and were kind of like, okay, this is Dan. This is what Dan does. And I wish my parents would have sought out more spiritual counsel. I wish they would have gotten in touch with other psychic mediums and plant medicine people and pagans and energy healers that worked with the earth and its wisdom and felt the energy that a singular leaf contains that I could feel as a child and would talk about and tell people about, and people would look at me like I was fucking batshit, but they were also like, oh, this is a kid. It's their imagination talking about how the tree just told them this, when in reality, for me, it was my reality that I was having long conversations with certain trees. And I still, when I go visit New York, I still have long conversations with those trees. I also feel like it's important to recognize that the society that we have also doesn't cater to teaching children how to nourish their nervous system. I'm born and raised in Staten Island, New York. I have a lot of love for Staten Island, even though everyone fucking shits on it as a borough. Listen, I get it. We got some fuck-ass people there that I don't agree with personally. It is what it is. But I love where I grew up. It's still a part of New York City. I really thought I grew up in the suburbs until I got to like college age and I started visiting other people in their hometowns, and I was like, bro, there's like 2 stores here. They're like, yeah, we live like deep in the suburbs. I'm like, this is not a fucking suburb. You live in the country. Then I visited the country and I was like, oh my God. So growing up, I really thought that Staten Island was the suburbs. I have grown to know it is very much still city energy and very city-like. And so I think pieces of me as a young child who dealt with existential dread and feeling how alive the earth was, I really needed some of those nervous system practices and understanding of not just the practices themselves, but understanding, what does anxiety feel like in your body? What does fear feel like in your body? This is why we experience fear. Why do you feel like you might be experiencing fear right now? Like, I really needed an adult to get curious with me and teach me those things, and I did not have that. So I do think that parts of me needed to be medicated because I got to a certain point. And you could also argue that maybe my parents should have also stepped in when I was drinking and smoking and doing blow and all this other stuff. But you also have to recognize that that was the culture that I was growing up around. At 16 in Staten Island, it was very normal to be going out to a bar with your fake ID or a club in the city being Manhattan, and getting drunk, right? Like all of us, literally all of us, after we went to prom, all went to nightclubs in the city. Right? And I'm sure some of them were nightclubs where you didn't need to have fake IDs and stuff like that. But other times we did need to have fake IDs. And so you could argue that there was this like, you should have been more sheltered in the using drugs and alcohol area, and also recognize just where I grew up. It was all of my friends. So what were they going to completely not let me go to school and hang out with my friends? Like, I was doing coke before or after school, it wasn't like, so there's those pieces to take into consideration as well. We'll take another deep breath in and out. I always think it's so funny when I start these podcast episodes, how I try to be like super chill and I try to really have my voice be very low and like, and then I really just start talking like myself and I lose it. And I notice at some point during the episode that I'm like, you're fucking screaming into these people's ears, Dan, please. Okay. So I do want to talk about community for a moment, because that's been a big question here. I live in the Sacred Valley of Peru, and people asking that question, because I do have, there are a lot of kids here. Obviously, there are a lot of local kids, but there are also a lot of expat kids where people have traveled far and wide and they're from all over the globe, and, they've settled here to send their kids to some type of Montessori school, and their kids come with them to every kirtan that they go to, and their kids go with them into the jungle and drink medicine, and stuff like that. So community has been a big topic of conversation. So let me say, coming off of antidepressants, holy shit, if you've been one of my good friends since the end of 2020, I would give my arm for you, because it's very difficult to witness life after being medicated. And I've already kind of explained that in here, so I'm not gonna re-explain it for you guys while you're listening, but community was very important. Not just my friends, but also the example that I can give is there was a plant medicine church that I worked at that was very ungrounding, and there was a lot of ayahuasca abuse and many other forms of abuse happening there. But that's not the topic of conversation today, although it's a good one. But with that being said, there are some people that have been coming to integration circles with us since those times, and they have listened to me talk relentlessly about the same things over and over and over again, and I couldn't have done it. I'm one of those people. Not only do I love to beat a dead horse, right? You want to talk shit about the same thing we've been talking shit about since middle school? I'm there. But I am one of those people that talking things out for me gives me new perspective, and it always feels like there's a layer that I get to peel back if I really get to go into it deeply. So if you're one of those people who's a part of our integration community, we meet every month, by the way, on Zoom. Dylan hosts it. Thank you guys so much for listening to me talk about the same shit over and over. And yes, I do think that community is a big reason why I've been able to move past it. My closest friends are my family, by the way. I don't have contact with a lot of my family, and then I have limited contact with other family. And it's just so interesting because I needed my family, right, which are my closest friends and my mom and my brother. But I also really needed some of these random community spaces that I have found myself in over the years. Random spiritual spaces where I've sat and we've done some type of gathering together, and then someone asks me to share and I get to be open and honest, and it feels so good to be witnessed by other people. Sometimes it doesn't. There was an authentic relating circle that I went to at some point this year, and I was really shocked that everyone in the space besides me had never been medicated. I was like, damn, so you people are like mentally stable? Fuck you. So sometimes it doesn't always feel so great. But I was also, again, authenticity is the highest form of, I think the highest frequency that we have. And so I was open and honest about my experience, even though none of them could relate to it, they all listened intently and were like, wow, that sounds really difficult and really hard. And like, yeah, it is really difficult and really hard some days. So thank you so much for listening. I also think that the community that I had when I was on medication was also a really beautiful piece of the puzzle as well. So I think overall, having different forms of community is important. And what I mean by that is, if you struggle with mental health, having places where maybe you do group therapy, or it's group therapy adjacent, which is what we always say about Dylan's integration circles, is that they're group therapy adjacent, right? Having those types of spaces is important, but also like having the types of spaces to have fun where like I get to go to ecstatic dances and talk to people afterwards or before, or maybe if I see them again after that. Those are important. Having certain interests that are similar with people, right? Like listening to the same music, liking the same hobbies, like go and search out those people because they become smaller communities for you. I had a ceramics community. I never knew that I needed ceramics so badly in my life until I showed up and I was like, I actually need this. This is really grounding for me. I go every week. I get to talk to the same people. We get to use our hands and work with clay, and it was very, very healing for me. So I do think that community comes in all different shapes, forms, and sizes. And I know a few episodes back that I talked about religion, and I said, I think a lot of times we see people deeply desire to go back to organized religion because they don't really fucking believe the shit that's coming out of this religion's mouth, but they miss having community. They miss having people that they see every week. They miss having people that, they have something in common. Maybe you don't fully believe in Catholicism, but you kind of believe in it. So you go and you get to sit around with a bunch of other Catholic people who you can make jokes with or you can talk about something with, and you have a commonality and you can meet every single week. So I do think, and I said that what I'm about to say right now, I said in that episode, you need to find community. I don't give a motherfucker if it's a bowling community. Go find somewhere where you can be every week, every other week, at least once a month. And that will make a world of a difference in your life. I'm constantly telling my one-to-one clients that. I'm always checking in on that. Okay. And then I really want to kind of close this out with like what I'm still working on. I'm still working on everything. I recognize that I am a work in progress. And there are so many more questions I could have answered, but I don't want to answer them because I just want to talk to you guys. I recognize that things happen in life. And you make some progress, and then sometimes you fall off that progress. It could be as simple as you were going to the gym for 6 weeks, and then you fell off for a few days, and you really struggled for the last 3 months to go at all. Or it could be something like in my life where I did feel like I was crawling out of that space of grief. Coming off of Paxil, I also lost a lot of... I came off my antidepressants, and a few weeks later, I ended a long-term relationship that I was in. I had an abortion, and I also had to put down my childhood dog tomorrow, which is December 29th. It will be Gigi's 5-year death anniversary. And so with that, being said, right, I felt like I was finally moving past those things. And then I got bit by that Holy Trinity mosquito. For those of you that don't know, I was bit by a mosquito when I was living right outside the jungle in Mexico. It was carrying dengue fever, West Nile virus, and Lyme. And I was very sick I was in the hospital in Mexico for about a month. Then when I got approved that I could fly without hemorrhaging, it was another, I want to say 16, 17 months of just in and out of the hospital, in and out of doctors, Western doctors, Eastern doctors, everything under the sun. It was very difficult. And so I felt like I was finally making progress on being off of antidepressants, and the grief that had followed me getting off the antidepressants. And then that happened. And it like compounded all of it together. Not only was I, not feeling well, but that not feeling well also translated into extreme forms of anxiety for me, being nervous about going anywhere, being nervous about seeing mosquitoes, being nervous about my blood pressure going up and my eyes going blurry and me passing out, being nervous that I was going to have to be hooked up to a lot of machines again, if I couldn't get my blood pressure down. It translated to a lot of depression where I couldn't spend time with my friends, right? I was in and out of all these doctor's visits. My body wasn't healthy enough to do the things that I normally did with people. And so it felt like it compounded on top of me. And so with that being said, I just recognize like we make little pieces of progress every single day, even if it doesn't look like it. Because at that point in my life, it felt like, so I got bit by that mosquito in September of 2022. The end of 2022 and all of 2023 was fucking miserable for me. It was so miserable. And I felt like throughout that time, I was making no progress on my nervous system, no progress on my mental state. I wanted to be back on medication more than anything. I mean, I could have put myself back on medication. Obviously, I didn't. I was trying everything else under the sun to not go back on medication. And what I recognized from that experience now was the strength that came from that. I would show up to some of these doctor's visits and I was experiencing ocular migraines. When you get dengue fever, it feels like somebody is pushing your eyes from the inside out. It is it like burns and it's heavy. It's a horrific sensation. And so I was getting a lot of ocular migraines, and I would show up to the hospital or I would show up to the doctor's office, and I would have my sunglasses on with a hat on, and I would sit in the corner and I would do my EFT tapping, and I would do the breath work, and I would be listening to some song to soothe me or calm me down. And I didn't feel like it was actually doing jack shit for me at that time because I was just in so much pain. But I recognized that I was at least training my nervous system to know I'm here for you. I know you feel absolutely terrible. I know that the last place you want to be is in another doctor who's going to look at you, ask you the same fucking 10 questions, get freaked out that you had dengue fever, all this stuff. But I was showing up for myself. And I was very slowly training my body to understand that I can show up for myself, that I can be there for myself. So I hope that that makes sense, because I do think that's an important piece of the puzzle. So as you continue to go further, whether you can relate to my story or not relate to my story, just remember, even if it doesn't feel like we're making progress, every single day there's something. Even if it's just you like learning something new, right? Like we all have access to the internet, and many of us learn something new every day because we have access to the internet. You see a new recipe or a fun fact or a gardening, tip or trick. So every day we are making progress on who we want to be in the future. Just because they aren't these grandiose things, and just because we feel like we're not at the end of the tunnel, doesn't mean that we're still not making our way there. Truth be told, I don't feel like I'm at the end of the tunnel. In some ways, I feel like I'm at the end of the tunnel. I feel more myself than I probably have in a very, very long time. And I have so much gratitude to myself, to the magic of the unseen and spirit around me, and to all the people that have helped me get here. And yeah, I had 2 panic attacks this year. I've still struggled with anxiety and compulsive anxiety-ridden thoughts this year. So I'm still a work in progress, and I would never ever claim to be somebody who has it all together. And if that is the teacher or the mentor or the friend or community person that you're looking for, I'm not that person. And I'm happy that I'm not that person, only because I don't feel it's authentic when you meet somebody and they quote unquote have it all together. If you spend a little bit more time with them, you can usually start to see the little cracks, and the little cracks are not a bad thing. I'm not saying everybody's got to be fucking bent in half, right? But like, we all have little cracks that we are moving through and learning and growing with. And those are beautiful pieces that make us who we are. Oftentimes when I sit with elders is when I'm reminded of this, right? So when you sit with like a true elder, it's so beautiful. First off, true elders don't give a fuck about anything because they're old. They are like, who cares? But the other piece of that is usually they like to hit on the fact that they are still learning. And the day they stop learning is the day that they are died. They are dead. They have crossed over. Because being in a human body means that we are learning and growing and shifting and changing. It doesn't always mean that we're going to be stuck in the same cycles that we've been stuck in, because I can even reflect on that, sharing with you guys right now. When I was in high school, I was passing out from how much anxiety and panic attacks I was having. It was crazy. Whereas now, as a 29-year-old adult, apparently, is what they say about my age, I don't pass out, but I recognize that if I start to feel that panic and that anxiety, I gotta find a floor. I gotta lay down. If I could put my legs up on a wall, I need to do that right now. If I could get something cold in my hand, that would be good. Like, I have learned and I have grown. And so although it's not the same cycle where I was just passing out, it's still a cycle. It's different. I show up in a different way, and that's okay. And that's okay. So I think that's everything I want to share. I wish all of you many blessings. I hope what I said made sense and that there's some nugget of wisdom for you, maybe a community member, maybe a loved one. And as this calendar year of 2025 comes to a close, I wish you and yours many, many blessings into 2026. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for being the person that you are. I would love to hear your reflections and your thoughts, and not only what you thought about what I said, but also if you can reflect on your life. Are there cycles that you feel you've moved through that have changed for you? Have you experienced being medicated and not being medicated? And what was that like for you? I would love to hear. So I will see you all very soon.